sad to say I'm on my way. Won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town.
This 140 is way too far gone. It really got in there, like it's packed completely. Oh, tragedy. Cute blue interior though. Wow, these rats, man. Holy cow. This is the problem we have out here. This is probably a mountain car, more likely though. Yeesh. Let's see how much. Yeah, this is kind of like what my 242 looks like that I gave to Soren. It's a 74 with the fuel injection. Next to an older BMW. Alrighty folks, we've got a lot to cover in this episode about rear retractable seatbelts in a Volvo Amazon. I'll take on the fronts in another episode because I will, there's just enough to cover. The rear is the one that's going to be a little tricky for the 2 and 4 door models. I think the process is pretty similar for both. There's a very useful PDF, I'm putting the link in the description down below, and the VP seatbelts they will give you for right around $100. They'll sell you a 3-point seatbelt kit for one corner, one side that's gonna be the reel with the belt and the buckle portion. Now, the trouble that we had was, as you'll see right here, we need a 4th point for the rears, and that is where the belt goes over and reaches the top, kind of comes over the shoulder and then has that downward motion toward the passenger. A lot of this footage was shot almost 2 years ago, so I'm really not sure why I did what I did, but I kind of messed up. I overlooked the fact that VP's seatbelt kit that I ordered for Bruce is gray, and I'm somehow messing with this black seatbelt kit, so it's the wrong kit. But if you do order any seatbelt, like a generic seatbelt, this will actually help you, this process that I went through here. And because some of the seatbelts don't come with that 4th point, which is that little triangle-shaped piece with a single bolt that changes the direction of the belt relative to the reel. A lot of these components, like even the seatbelts that I put in Arthur, were only 3-point, not 4-point. I don't even know if it's called 4-point. That's just what I'm calling it. Now, my lawyers tell me that I gotta make sure that anything that I tell you here is just my journey through my restoration of my car, so don't take this for any legal counsel, and any work and modification that you do for your car is really at your own risk, okay? So that frees up my liability, but I wanna make sure that I help you in any way that I can with this video. Picking up this little piece from the BMW is actually a very useful tool for assembling or modifying a 3-point seatbelt kit. And these floppy bottoms here, I ended up replacing with the different setup from the VP kit. I think that's it. I'm here inside a BMW 328i from 1988. Actually, it might be 318, but that doesn't matter. It's an E30. And those little buckles in the back there, those are perfect. It's exactly what we were looking for. Nice long bolt. Of course, the bolts are a little bit bigger on this than they are on the Amazon, but we can always undersize those. It's got those deep washers there. And in the front as well, the same exact piece. So I'm gonna grab all 4 of these. Luckily, the seatbelts are a little kind of ugly, so I don't feel so bad about cutting them. We're gonna start building our seatbelts here on that top anchor point because that is the most customization you're gonna need for this job. These cars didn't come with back seatbelts, at least not in the 60s, not in America. Maybe some of like the 1970 Canadian models, I don't know. I did all the work, so you don't have to. Here's our top anchor. It still pivots, it's nice and firm. And I used a little bit of oil to get this bolt hole, which is a 3/8 16 bolt thread. Remember, these are all standard bolt threads here. I think the carburetors are the only thing that are metric since they were an English design. The bolt length is 1.5 inches because the shorter bolt that I picked up to try that, which is just a 1 inch, was a little too short. You can kind of see through the top hole how much of that bolt comes out. You could probably get away with 1.25 inch, but I'm really happy with the 1.5. As I run this through with oil, that helps the threads clean up. You might even need to chase the threads if you have a lot of paint on there. I had the car sandblasted, so there's a lot of spots here where it's just still bare metal. My paint shop did not get those, which sucks. I'm a little upset about that. I would think that they'd get inside these surfaces, but that's a little bit more work for me to do. Here are these spots from waxing the roof. I'm really happy with the two-tone. So if you haven't seen those videos, check those out. This BMW anchor here, it's a nice little one. It's got a pop cap. This cap pops off. A couple of them do get brittle from years of being in the sun, especially in a backseat area. This parcel shelf's gonna take a lot of UV rays. Inside we've got a sandwich of bolts and hardware. We've got a big washer in the front, a nylon washer which goes inside of this, and then we've got the large spacer and another washer on the rear. You can see that other washer is necessary for this whole thing to spin, and there was even an additional nylon washer that I opted out of. This is what the bolt looks like that came out of the BMW setup, but since we're using these guys, let's show you how they compare. This is how our assortment came to be. On the bottom here, we've got our seatbelt. This was the one from VP Auto Parts. This is the kit that they sell you. Inside of the seatbelt, we kind of get an idea of how these things mount, which means the bolt would go through here. I've got this curvy washer, which is a lock washer. It goes there. The inside diameter of that hole is the smaller diameter on this, which does fit inside of everything really nicely. And then of course this little nylon lock at the end just sort of keeps everything together so the kit wouldn't separate and you wouldn't mix up how you want your things to be assembled. The BMW one gave us two kinds of bolts, one for the front, one for the rear. But of course we're gonna be using this bolt, this 1.5 inch bolt. It's a smaller diameter overall because we don't have large holes like this that we're threading into, and I don't feel like welding new plates and modifying a car since this has been working for everybody else. So we'll start with our guy in here, but see the difference on that size, which means we're gonna want a nice washer with a smaller inside diameter, so it's not gonna be too loose. I think that's a good size there. Also, you wanna put a nylon washer for it to spin. Now, ideally I would have been using this one with the shoulder, and that shoulder would tuck inside of here really nicely. But we'll see what we can make work instead. This guy also leaves a little bit of room on the inside for that other washer from this nylon piece. I'll see about finding one of those, but in the meantime, you kind of get the idea of what I'm getting at here. So with these all assembled, the thing is free to pivot on the larger collar-shaped bolt here. At the end, you want to put another washer. I don't think it's necessary to have another nylon. I think one is enough. And of course, everything being sandwiched together, it will make this nice and tight. It won't be loose like this once it's assembled. And that's all because of this nylon here. So that is all ready to go in, and I'll just show you again. Metal washer, nylon washer, seatbelt, collar, and a washer at the back side of it. Through the hole on the car, you've got about half of this material that it threads into, pretty much a standard nut size. You might have about that much of the bolt sticking out of the backside. Use Loctite, and you shouldn't have any worries about that coming loose. Also, a very important time for us to do this now, before the headliner is installed, because you do not want to be hunting for holes in a brand new headliner. It's doable, but it ain't fun. Our next order of business, getting this seatbelt reel to have this anchor somewhere midway on it, which is going to require us to disassemble it and be very careful not to drop the spring and unwind it all. But as you retract this all the way out, you will get a view from the top here of what the inside of the belt's going to look like. So you can see in there how it just sort of has this fold, probably with a stitched plastic piece at the end. As you take apart the sides, you're going to want to hold the reel. I'll see if I can get this on camera. It'll be fun. But before we do that, we also want to confirm the orientation of our belt. We want to see where this bolt is going to be mounting and the turns that it's going to make, the twists, because we want to be very careful with that. Also, I think, yeah, we're going to be using these two bolts as is, which means I'm going to be putting nuts on the other side and big plate washers that are going to be structurally attached to the frame. One of them goes into the wheel well, and this one goes on the inside inner well, which means a little bit of modification is going to have to happen to our door panel, not door panels, but our rear quarter panels. So that's all the upholstery shop's business there. It's my job to get these installed, present the car with them in so they know exactly where the holes are, what depth they have to work with, and if we need longer hardware, that's the time we'll address the issue. Until then, I've got the nuts for these, and I still need to get some big plate washers, but I can at least get it somewhat installed now. It's not fun drilling new holes into the car, and I think for the seatbelt you only need to do one, which is going to be here onto the inner rear fender wells. We're now inside the car. You're looking at the hump on the rear seat. Here is our guy. And there it goes. This is our rear buckle. We've actually got 4 bolt holes right here, and these sizes are a 5/16 18 thread. I got a 1.25 inch bolt here. On the inside I have 1 nylon washer that's a little bit too big for the bolt. I'll make sure to replace that. Followed by a steel washer. That's gonna go inside of here. Then we have our little sleeve bit. And that fits nicely in there. That comes with the kit. Oh, don't forget, pull that sleeve out. Put the lock washer in, that little wavy lock washer. Stick that in there. And then our little plastic nylon bit. That still leaves us about I don't know, 3/4 inch to 1 inch. Some people have had luck with going diagonally on these. And since we have 2 holes to choose from, we will experiment a little bit and just see which one is going to be our best choice. Diagonal might be the best if you want. These are very easy. There's not a lot of work required to make this rear lower bolt section work. And on the back side, there's actually a metal plate that connects these two and these two. I'll go underneath and I'll show you in a second. But basically that's just going to drape over the back seat like that. So pretty easy. Just make sure you have all the right size washers, hardware. Please use some Loctite. Tie those threads in there. And yeah, it's a little dusty in here just because sand, New Mexico. Blech. We're underneath the car now, and you can see those plates I was talking about between those 2 bolts. And then that large screw that was just sticking out of the metal, that's attached to that right there. And it looks like some sort of old exhaust hanger that somebody had retrofitted. You see the bolt sticking out from that end? All right, we got about a 1/2 inch of bolt coming out the back. It's a comfortable limit for me. It stays out of the way of the hump, thankfully, which is the spot where if you have some sort of failure of suspension, your differential will sit up in there a little bit. Or even on full compression, that's where it sits. A lot of the suspension's getting replaced, which is why it's ugly and unpainted and blasted and all that stuff, so we have all that to look forward to. We have all our guys in baggies here, so we're gonna go run off to the hardware store and get the necessary parts. Should be my last hardware run before everything's ready to bolt up. I hope that works. All right, here we go. The endless selection of screws, nuts, and bolts. Washers, pins, and caps. Also known as your local Ace Hardware store. Let's try to find what we're looking for. My finest assortment of hardware. As you see here, I have wavy washers. There's a legitimately locking washers. I have these flat, large washers. If you get the right size, you may use them in coin turn machines. We'll see if that's a good idea or not. I'm just kind of making all this up as I go along, you see? As it comes out of the box, big bolt, wavy washer, sleeve collar, plastic thing that just holds everything in together, and then large flat washer. And inside of there will go the metal surface into where this will attach. Okay, so just pretend that's there. Following the immediate side, another washer, and of course we don't have enough room for a small washer, so I will just put the nut on the end. There is the blue thread lock on there, and I shall use a bit of red since we are going to be using these last 4 or 5 threads there, and we've taken up all the extra space. Now that you kind of have an idea and are completely lost of what I'm doing, I will show you on the inside of the car. Et voila. So, as you cannot see on the inside there, it's the nut and the big washer, and on the outside, the other washer. Still free to move about like such. This is very important. And the next step is now to unwind this and stick in our medium bit right here on the top so that we can have a shoulder anchor. You see where that bolt is? That's the one. Now, let's see what we have to work with here. This is going to mount like that. The seatbelt's going to come up. Okay, this is the way we're gonna have our twist. So it's going to come up from the inside of this piece, okay, and it will make this twist. Can you see? All right, compress it, wiggle it, push out the other end. Ah, there we are. We made it. This is a square. The holes are irrelevant. I really hope you guys can see any of this. Go like this. Like that. I hope that makes sense because I'm a bit confused. Well, here we go. Point of no return. Okay, our most important consideration is where is the seatbelt going to come up. We're basically going to just center our hole underneath that square bit. And I know that the seatbelt's going to go up and then immediately forward, so maybe it would be best not to do that, but one of the biggest issues I'm going to have to contend with right now is the fact that the seatbelt, as it comes up through the hole, it's immediately going to go forward, which means this guy, if I have it all the way in up against the wall there, while it will be the closest install, it means that it's going to be putting the most strain on the seatbelt up against that metal bit. I am going to use some sort of like edging on that inside edge there. I'll make sure the upholstery shop does something like that to prevent this seatbelt from getting cut. If I did move it into the center, it's less resistance, but if I move it all the way out like this, you know, we can actually just let it sit sideways. It won't look as clean. It really won't. So I think our best choice is to just put it up against the edge and let it live its life like that. So you make your decision. I think when I'm at a show and I have the trunk open, people are gonna look and they don't want the seatbelt to look like it was haphazardly attached on the outside. I'd rather them see it up against the edge. It'll be a cleaner install. It won't be as practical. This seatbelt's really not gonna get used too much, you know, even though that's not a great excuse, because who knows, someday I may have friends. Until that day, I'm stuck with the seatbelt that's gonna be mounted cleanly, but it won't be in the path of least resistance. It'll be a little harder on the belt webbing itself. But a good nylon corner, and it really doesn't matter, I don't think. I think it'll be a negligible difference once we get that good nylon corner on the inside edge of the metal there. Boom! It's nice and flat all the way to the center of this. You don't want to drill too low or else you're gonna have to bend your washer in a very uncomfortable and inconvenient spot. Past the point of no return. All right, I really wised up on this other side. Seems to have fallen down my butt cheek. That's what we call this piece, of course. On these lower buckles, I've made some changes. Final answer for my arrangement is going to be this. Bottom buckle piece, here's the assortment of bits and pieces for it. Large bolt here, I think this is a 3/8 by 18 thread, 1.5 inch bolt, something like that. Okay, so the way this is gonna go is it's going to have a washer at the base. Following that washer, we'll put on one nylon. This nylon is going to be bigger than here. It needs to fit over that. That's very important, you see? Okay, so the nylon's on there. And then another washer, the same thing with the diameter, where it's a bigger diameter from that sleeve, because it's going to squish on it. And then you stick this over here as it came from the VP Auto Parts assembly box. And then that goes in here. Now, as the spring washer collapses, you'll see that this does come through, which is why these washers need to sit over it like that. Great. And the reason there's two of them is because we want a proper amount of squish ensured between this. We don't want to have to underdo it. Okay. That still leaves you about 1 inch of bolt through the end there, which really straightforward. This just bolts into the bottom. I've got the plate that runs over the hump. Of course, don't forget, use the thread locker on the end of this. And at the very end of this thing, I'm going to stick a lock washer, which is a wavy one. These are different than the split lock washers. These are actually wavy and kind of cool. I was told that's the more proper style for automotive use, but you hardly see these anywhere, although they are on the seatbelt kit. That's the only time I've seen them on automotive use. And actually some old Italian cars. Looking at you, Lancia. Here's one thing to consider, the bigger picture. While you may have welded plates that make your seatbelts, impervious to collisions, a collision in this car that's going to need more force than what is currently available by drilling a hole into the fender well or anchoring up by the top C-pillar there. A crash at that speed in this car, it's really unlikely that you'll survive or that you'll really get much more help. This isn't going to rip out of the hole that it's attached to there, so you know this is a pretty solid assortment of bits and pieces, but it's really it only goes so far in an old car that doesn't have airbags and it doesn't have crumple zones like modern cars do. So I know Volvo was really early on that bandwagon, but this is before that time, so I think Volvo was the one that created the bandwagon. Yeah, I know at least one band that has toured the country in a Volvo station wagon, the bandwagon. Bolt, this one here, this is actually the longer bolt that you're going to want to use on these pieces. The one that I had on there earlier as I was assembling it, it was actually the bolt that I was going to be using on the bottom, which is why it doesn't need to be so long. Even though it's full of washers, it's just sandwiched with washers, it's still, look at that, there's still more than enough thread than there was on the other one. So when you're using this longer bolt, I think it's 1.5 inches, I'm going to stick it on here. Boom, it gives you that much of extra bolt, which is more than enough. This is how the final fitment looks inside the wheel well. All you guys that are lowered, Stance Nation, I don't think you're gonna have to worry about this bolt up here. It is kind of just centered on the wheel. This is a stock height rear end, which is unloaded right now, which means very little weight. And the tire's flat, but it's basically how it's gonna sit. If you do lower the car, you may not have an issue. You know, if you're really low, like even on airbags, that pitman arm's gonna push the axle to the right. So it is possible if you're slammed, you might have some interference, but you see that bottom bump there is actually sticking out a bit. If you do, your easy solution is to put a carriage bolt in its place, which is just gonna have a rounded head and a square hole. View from the top. And I don't like that the flash makes everything yellow. The view from the inside. Now it's time to start bolting up the rest of it. This bolt is really tight, and with that, there's still free motion on this bit, which is really nice. And that's done by, this motion here is thanks to that nylon washer inside that is actually sleeving the gap. It has that little shoulder on it, and it's sleeving the gap really nicely. So that's allowing everything to go. Now, the hole for the headliner needs to be no bigger than the diameter of that sleeve there, and our finishing touch. And if you're worried about it showing, we've got this nice cap, et voila. You will not see it unless, well, you shouldn't see it at all, to be honest. The headliner should absorb that space since it is kind of a floating surface here. Looks pretty nice, I think. I know it's a bit difficult to see everything when it's black on black like this, but there she is. Oh. What I've done here is I put a binder clip at that 45-degree angle, and that seems to be the happy angle for the seatbelt to live. Let's put some tape so it doesn't damage it. And of course, let's take another look in here. I'm not crazy about the tag showing on this side. I wish it were probably reversed, or no, this is actually the way you want it to be. I had to flip the hardware on the bottom one so that the mount would work properly. And this is to keep your top belt at a certain height. It's backwards though, but you know, nobody was going to notice it when it's like that. So there you have it, folks. Now, the important question is headliner. Another one of the tricky things you're going to be dealing with is if you've got a headliner, you want to add these seatbelts in. It will be easy enough to pop the hole through the bottom there, but you don't want to be poking holes in your headliner. So I'm going to take a measurement for you. That way you can see the distance. got a little wiggle room, so I'd say just do it 3 7/8 inches over. And concerning over here, I'm gonna center that bump right there. It's funny where my head is right now, it looks like it's 1 7/8, but where the camera's at, it looks like it's right at 2.5. So I'm gonna say just do it right about, yeah, just do it at 2. And if you're looking from the top, butt up the tape measure to the end. Yep, it's right there at about 3 1/4 inches. And if you can do anything with this measurement, go ahead. I'll leave that to you. Right, well, I'm happy with it, and I think it's time to move on. The next thing I've got to do is all these bare metal bits and pieces around where the painters didn't get it and the sandblasters did. I'm gonna go through with a brush and just put some black Rust-Oleum paint on there to seal it up. It's been kind of a messy assortment of bits and pieces, but I hope you've enjoyed watching the installation of the seatbelt, and good luck on your own. If you have questions, put them in the comments. I do check my comments regularly, even after all these years. I will be still occasionally going back until I've hit Broadway. Subscribe, give the video a thumbs up so other people looking for this information can find it. And we'll see you in a few days with another video on getting this car ready for upholstery.
Turning around, I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town.